So you want to get into reloading. Get ready for the journey of your life. Hi everyone, it's the 4-Gun Guy. And this is going to be a pretty long and intense video because, and it's taken me a while to put it together. As I was going through my reloading process, and if you look at some of my other videos, you'll see that process that I go through. I started to look at all this stuff and think about the journey that I've taken over the past 5 years in reloading, how I ended up with the equipment I ended up with. And then I thought, you know what, let's really put everything in perspective from what if I was just starting out, or the cheapest way I could go, the mid-level way, or if I really just won the lottery and I wanted to do everything first class, what would that look like? And what would all those different journeys cost? Then I'm going to talk about what I'm using today, what I have today, and the cost for all that equipment. And then I'm going to end up with a column. We're going to go to one of my favorite famous spreadsheets. And then we're going to end up with a column of, if I was going to begin this journey today, what are the things that I would definitely invest in, buy once, cry once type of things? And what things could I probably, get by with that aren't that expensive? So let's start this long journey. We're going to be in a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of numbers. So if you're ready to go, let's get to it. Okay, well, I'm going to put the spreadsheet up here as I talk. And what I wanted to do first is, let's go through this kind of entry-level column. So I broke things down into everything that I could think of, and I'm sure I still forgot some things. But entry-level is based on price. That's really what it's based on, right? So I start with the press. This is the Forster coax that I love. So this was what, $365. And then we're going to get into, and I'm kind of following my reloading process. So just so you know, that's why the order of things are the way they are, because these are some of the things that you use when you either get your new brass or you're reloading your fired brass. This is kind of the process. But I wanted to start with the press because that's like the center of everything here, right? The center of our universe. Then I move on to all the comparator, the measurement kind of equipment that you're going to want to look at. I'm not saying you need to have all of these things, but you need to at least keep in mind you're going to need most of them. So from a caliper standpoint, right? Yeah, you could go with something like a Sinclair International. It's not expensive, $42. There are much more options out there. If you go to Amazon, man, there's a ton of them. I did try the eye gauging, just so you know, and those didn't work out too well. They kind of fell out of calibration pretty quickly. But you could get some reasonably priced calipers to measure. Then we get into things like the bullet comparators, the headspace comparators, case gauges. Now, guys, if I go into detail on what every one of these things does, we're going to be here for like 3 hours. So look these up, but these are things that you're going to need to look at to get into reloading. So a case gauge, go, no-go gauges, you're probably going to want that. And I'm going to pause here also and say that in this specific section with these gauges and whatnot, you've got to be careful, because if you pick a cartridge, like I went with 6 BRA, right? 6mm BRA as my new cartridge. I quickly found that at the time I started with the BRA, there wasn't a lot out there for that cartridge. So if you're going to go with some Wildcat cartridge that has just come out because it's the new cool thing, realize you may not see some of this equipment, some of these gauges and whatnot out there even ready for that caliber or for that cartridge. So just be careful with that, right? It's great to stick with a proven cartridge, like if you're going to go 6mm, maybe a Dasher or Creedmoor or GT, something like that, where you're sure you're going to be able to find this stuff. But look, when we get to these gauges and everything, I find that Sinclair, Hornady, and Forster have some really good gauges at very reasonable prices. So you might want to look there. Depriming, there's a decapping die that you could put in your press for 12 bucks. That's not bad. Case cleaning, this is a whole nother world that people get into, and a lot of, I'm not going to say arguments, but, dry tumbling, wet tumbling. Do you use metal balls or little steel pillars in your wet tumbler? Blah. Whatever you want to go with, you go with it. But this is something that, for the price, I think this dry tumbler kit from Forster or from Frankfurt Arsenal really has done a great job for me. And then I also threw in the corncob media, because you're going to need to change that out about every 1,000 cases, right? And then I have a whole section below that talks about miscellaneous stuff. So, but that's that. Case prep. Now, you're probably going to want something like this Frankfurt Arsenal case prep station just to have it on hand. If you're using a trimmer like I do that automatically trims, chamfers, and deburrs, that's great, but sometimes you're going to pull something out of there and you're like, it didn't really get it. And you're going to want to have something like this to clean your primer pockets, if you clean primer pockets. I do. Some guys never touch them. If you're going to clean the inside of your case neck, this has a tool for that. So just something like this. And then I've got the options out there. So when we get to the other options, you'll see that. Annealers. Here's another thing that is just, people look at all these options and, excuse me, there are different types of flame annealers. There's a few different induction annealers. I've gone with the amp annealer, but there was a journey there, and I've got some videos on that journey. You can see the different things I looked at, and you'll see those. Case lube. This could be in the miscellaneous, but I think it was important enough to really bring it up here. Case lube, you've got this manual Imperial sizing die wax. That works great, but it's a manual process. So we're going to talk about something else that'll work for you in a little bit. Sizing dies. Here's where we really get into the nuts and bolts of how you're going to size those cases, right? So at the low end, we've got like the Widden full-length sizing die, and there are other sizing dies. Funny, just side story. I just shot with a buddy of mine who's breaking in a brand new 6 Creedmoor, and he kind of went the cheaper route on the sizing dies. He had so much run out, it's unbelievable. So be careful of how cheap you can go. So some of these things you're going to look at them and go, oh, I can get one cheaper than that 4-gun guy. You can, but I promise you, you're going to, this is where cost is going to start biting you, right? In things like this. Case trimming. You can go with a motorized from Lyman for $140. There are other manual trimmers that are out there. But here's what I did. On some of this stuff, guys, I did say, look, start right off the bat with motorized, because I can promise you, you're going to get, well, let's put up over here. You're going to get the manual trimmer, and after about 1,000 cases of that, you're going to be pulling your hair out because it's such a pain in the butt, right? Just, this is one of those things that start, even if it's a cheaper version, start with it. You'll save yourself a lot of time and hassle. Primer seating, same thing. You know, I've got my Frankfurt Arsenal hand primer seater up there. It worked fine, but not great. And I've gone to this other primer seater from Forster. So we're going to get to that. Powder dispensing. Okay, here's where you're going to get to it, right? If I were starting out, and we're going to get to that column, but At the low end, let's just keep it that way. At the low end, you have something like, this is my Chargemaster light up here that I went from to the auto trickler. But the Chargemaster light was a great little machine. It's not as accurate, and you're gonna give up a little accuracy when you get to this low end stuff. But at the low end, that's not a bad option. I think I have the Frankfurt Arsenal in here just because it was cheap, 210 bucks, not bad. Bullet seating. Redding bullet seater die is $142. Bullet seating's a whole nother topic, guys, that when you get to either the way I do it, which is with a press right here, with a press and a top bullet seater, or you get to it with something that is a die that you use your press with, this is going to be your call. I have loved this setup here, and we're going to get to that when we get to my column. But you can get into it much cheaper at 142 bucks for just a seating die. And then we look at things like the concentricity gauge, which is this up here. I didn't bring it down, but you're going to want something to check that concentricity. And look, this is another one of those instances that where across the board, well, there is a more expensive one, but across the board, I just went with this Sinclair. This thing has been awesome, and it's another buy once, cry once type of thing. Now, if we go down to, I'm going to come down to some of the other things you're going to need. You're going to need some trays, right? These are just Frankfurt Arsenal trays, and I put 6 in here. So these are like $6.75 a piece. I'd get 6 of them. That's why I have 6 in there. Then I had a bullet puller. You're going to need a bullet puller because you're going to load these things, and all of a sudden something's going to go wrong. You got to pull that bullet out, and you're going to need something to do that. So just get that. Now let's look at the miscellaneous column. Marking pens, length gauges, tweezers, acetone to remove your markings on your cases. I did put that imperial sizing wax there, but I took it off here as a 0 because I already had it up above. Templac paint. If you're going to flame anneal, you're going to need Templac. Steel wool if you're going to clean the outside of your necks, which I do once about every 3 firings now. 6 containers. These containers, I think I say cup here, but they're quartz. These containers that I put my brass in as I'm going through my process. And then some just pipe cleaners. And then some, there's going to be miscellaneous stuff that I've missed here, guys. So I'd throw another 50 bucks on here. So my point here is if you wanted to get into reloading on the, quote, cheap, you could probably get into it for around $2,000. Let's add another 100 for the things that I missed. So let's say $2,200 you could get into reloading. So that's that low end there that I was talking about, that entry level. Let's put it that way, entry level, okay? Now, I'm going to pause here. I'm going to readjust the spreadsheet so we can talk about the mid and the high levels, and we're going to see what those look like as compared to that low. Okay, now let's look at a mid-level and the higher level of this equipment that you could consider, okay? So when we start looking at the presses, you've got the Hornady lock and load iron press with auto prime. That's 640 bucks. So remember, I think this one was 365, so we've gone up to 640. Or you could go to the Mac Daddy, which is the Area 419, the zero turret press at $1,275. So, you know, those are your options there. From a caliper perspective and measurement and gauges and all that, there's not a big difference in a lot of these prices. You look at the calipers, I would just say this. If you're going to go with the calipers, I would do the Mitu Toyo, these, and I would buy once, cry once. This is a buy once, cry once piece of equipment, right? You're going to get the best, some of the best that there is, and there's no doubt about how these things are made. They'll come with a certificate, a real certificate, and yeah, you'll notice I have 3 of them, and maybe I should have put that in the price. I think I might have in mine. But I have 3 of them because I just got tired of unscrewing those comparators, taking them off, putting them on, and I'm lazy, so it was worth the money for me to do that. But then on all this other stuff, on the comparators and whatnot, you see there's not a big price difference, right? We go from like $16 all the way up to $60 to $61 if you're going to go with the short action customs, or a little bit more less expensive if you go with the Hornady. Same with the case gauges. PT&G over there on the high is $99 and $118 for their case and no-go gauges. And look, as I said before, you don't need all of this, but you need to decide which ones you think are going to be important for how you reload. Depriming, this is where we have the decapping die that we had before, I think, and then this is where I'm going with the Harvey depriming tool. It's a hand deprimer. I just like this thing. It's a little more expensive. Case cleaning. Again, I put in some wet tumblers here just to have an option for you. Those go up to, again, $290 for the Sinclair. You can get a Frankfurt Arsenal. With those, you'll need some brass cleaning solutions, so I included that. And then the case prep, Frankfurt Arsenal and Lyman Express case prep. So they're basically this. It's just 2 different brands and a little different price point there. The annealer, I went with the bench source on the mid area there. And again, I did a review on that. I wasn't a big fan of it, but that's an option for you at $700. And then you do have the amp annealer, which is this one here. And you make sure you get 2 case holders because it makes annealing much faster process. And again, that's $1,635. So, yeah, we're gonna get to what I would go with if I was just starting out. So I'll stop there. The lube here, we go from the wax that I had before, the Imperial wax, to more of a spray solution. That's the lanolin alcohol solution. And I really like that option. It's $38 and you're going to have to keep buying that stuff. But I tend to get, out of one thing of this, I probably get, I don't know, 4,000 cases worth of lube. So it's not that bad. Sizing dies. Again, I put in some options here. I think the first one was the Widden full length sizing die. They also have a click adjustable sizing die. So I put that in here at 172. And then you can go all the way up to the short action custom sizing die with mandrel, which is what I've gone to. This has improved. I'm going to do a video on this. This has improved my SDs and my ESs quite a bit because it's really reduced the run out. Now, I did do a video with this without the mandrel compared to my Widden sizing die, and there was a big difference in the run out, but it didn't seem to make that much difference when we got to the SDs and the ESs when we shot. However, with the mandrel in here, I can tell you this has made a big difference in my SDs and ESs, but that's a whole nother video coming up. Case trimmer. The L.E. Wilson manual case trimmer is $185. That's actually more expensive than the motorized Lyman, but I put it in there, right? I wanted a mid-level here. And then you go all the way up to the Gerard, which is what I have here, and that is $550. So again, I'm just telling you, it's going to depend on what you want to do and how you want it to be done. This Gerard trims it, chamfers, deburrs, it does everything at the same time, and it has saved me a whole lot of time. Primer seating, again, there's the coax primer seater that you could get for your press. There's the Primal Rights competition primer seater at $675. Yeah. So if that's the kind of thing yeah. Anyway. Powder dispensing. Now we get to the higher end powder dispensers where we're talking about the Matchmaster powder dispenser that again goes to 1/10 of a grain accuracy, right? And that is at $900. I included the funnel there. Or you could go to the auto trickler like I have here with the scale, with the A&D scale. This is the auto trickler V3, and this was $1,070 basically. And then the 419 funnel head with the drop tube, that's this thing right here. Yep, that's $105. This is another thing though, I would say buy once, cry once. You're going to see that, I think, when we get over to the other columns. Bullet seating. This is where I start to talk about my process, which is the option here, which is the L.E. Wilson micrometer top bullet seater die with the K&M arbor press. This has served me very well. So you're looking at, you know, what is that? I don't know. About the same amount as you would get with the SAC the seating die, but that's a press-driven bullet seater. And just for me, I've loved this setup that I have. So yeah, for $270 versus $375, I'm very happy with what I have. Concentricity gauge, I remember I kind of took that across, but when we get to this high column, you see there's a concentricity gauge, and I've never heard of this, by Accuracy 1, and that thing's $480. So I'm assuming if you're bench rest or F-class, excuse me guys, that's probably the concentricity gauge you're going to use, although this Sinclair has just been awesome for me. Reloading trays and everything kind of stay the same here, although I did do the Sinclair heavy duty poly loading trays for the mid, and I did the Area 419 billet loading blocks, which are stainless steel, or aluminum rather. So if you want to spend your money on $330 for loading blocks, then I guess you can knock yourself out, and man, you've got more money than you're lighting cigars with $100 bills. But you can do that. I think that's up to you. That's great. A bullet puller, I kind of kept the same thing here. I don't know why the $18 bullet puller ended up there. That probably should be the cam lock bullet puller, which is the one I have for $34, but that's okay. And then down below is pretty much the same thing, right? I don't think I changed a whole lot between these two. It doesn't look like it. The Tempelac paint, remember, I don't need that with the annealing, or AMP, the amp, because the amp automatically determines the annealing for your specific case. So I don't need that $50 down there. Okay, let's look at the totals here. So if you went to the mid-level reloading, you're looking at $4,200. Let's add 100 like we did before, just for other stuff that I didn't figure on. $4,200. And if you go I am all in with some of the best stuff that's out there, you're into this for about $8,200, $8,300. Okay? Now, I forgot to mention in the beginning that at the end of this, we're going to see what the return on investment is, or the payback period in cases, and how that affects your overall cost of a single round. So we're going to look at that. But this $8,130 is quite a bit. And I know quite a few guys that are there. They're at that level. So I tell you what, let's now go back to my setup, what I have invested here on this table, and then we're going to talk about if I was starting out today, what might I think about doing, and which would save me a ton of money anyway, but let's look at those options. Okay, here we go. This is my setup. So I have the Forester coax. I have the Mitutoyo calipers. Now I should have made that 375. I really do apologize for that because I have 3 sets of them. I'm using the Sinclair, L.E. Wilson, and Forester gauges. I just never left those. I'm using the Harvey depriming, Frankfurt Arsenal dry tumbler, with the corn cob, the motorized platinum case trimmer right here, The amp annealer. Case lube, I use my lanolin alcohol. I am using the sack die with the mandrel. That's just what I've gone to, and I like it. I use the Gerard case trimmer over there. The Forester Coax primer cedar. Where am I? Yeah, right here. This is the primer cedar that I use. The auto trickler. So this is the setup for the auto trickler. I do have that Area 419 funnel. The L.E. Wilson bullet seating die with the K&M arbor press. Concentricity gauge, I still use the Sinclair up there. The reloading trays, the cheap Frankfurt Arsenal, and the bullet puller, the Frankfurt Quick and Easy Impact. No, that's the Hornady is my bullet puller. So I'm actually using the $38 ones. I apologize. It was late at night over many days that I put this thing together. So this is where that extra $100 probably comes into play. So if you look at everything that I have here, I've got about 53, let's say 5,400 into all the reloading here. And then you add the miscellaneous stuff. That really takes you to 5,432, but let's add another $100 just for the screw ups that I made here and some things I forgot. So let's say we're all in for 5,500 bucks, okay, for this reloading setup. And again, this is just to give you an idea of how I got here and what I have spent. I promise you, I have spent half as much on the things that I bought and then resold. Now, for the most part, I got my money back out of them, but I'd say I'm probably down 10% on all that stuff, maybe even 20%. So if that's, say, $2,700 that I spent on different annealing machines and then shipping them up, packing them up and selling them to people and shipping them out and blah, 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 blah. Let's say 20% of that's $540 that I probably wasted over the years getting to this point when I could have just bought this stuff and saved $540 or so. So that's my setup. Let's talk about if I was starting today, if I was going to start this today, I'd still go with this coax press. I love this thing. It's so simple. I have it bolted right here. It doesn't take up a lot of space. Love it. I'd go with the Mitutoyos, as I said before. The Sinclair Hornady, Forester gauges. The manual, I'd go with the Harvey manual decapping tool. Frankfurt Arsenal dry tumble kit, I'd keep that. Love it. This or some prep case prep system that's around this price range, $130 to $150. I would do the Annealy's annealer for $275. I loved that annealer. You're going to need the Tempelac, but I did love that annealer if you're not going to jump to an amp type of annealing, an induction annealer. Spray lube, I'd go with that. The Widden full-length sizing die with the bushing kit, I'd go with that one because that's what I was using on my 6.5 Creedmoor and when I started with the 6. And the Widden does a really good job for a reasonable price. I'd probably go with that Lyman motorized case trimmer for $140. I don't think you can beat that. The primer cedar, I'd still go with this coax primer cedar. I'd go with the Frankfurt Arsenal or something like that. They don't make this Chargemaster Lite anymore, I don't believe. I think now it's about Wi-Fi or something like that. But you could go with that, but I think that was up around $300, $289 or something. I've read good things about the Frankfurt Arsenal, and you still get 1/10 of a grain accuracy. I would spend the money on the 419 funnel kit. This is really adjustable, and if you even need to go higher on this drop tube, you could just add another drop tube and screw it on, screw this bushing on here, and then you'd be good to go. As I said, the arbor press, I would go with this. This is just what I like. The dial indicator with the Sinclair concentricity, I think that's good. The reloading trays, and then you could go with that bullet puller from Frankfurt arsenal, 18 bucks versus 38 bucks. And then the rest of this stuff down here, you will need that Temple-Act paint, so I added the 50 back in. So with everything here, you could get into this with a really pretty darn good setup, I think, for 2,600 bucks. Let's add 100, 2,700 bucks. And I think you'd have a really good beginning reloading station. Then you can work your way up. That Annealy's, when I sold that, I think I got $250 for it. So I dropped 25 bucks. Okay. 25 bucks, and then I shipped it for free. So that was another, I think, 20 bucks. So 45 bucks, but I got 2 or 3 years of use out of it. So that was worth it. And then I went to 2 other annealers, and I ended up with the amp. I should have just gone with the amp. But this was, this is just something that I wanted you to think about on reloading and what you might want to start with. A lot of guys get into this and they don't realize the expense that they're getting themselves into. Now realize, we haven't said anything about cases, bullets, primers, powder, none of that stuff. This is just the equipment that we're going to need to even start reloading. So what I want to do next is let's look at what this would translate to over multiple firings with cases and bullets and powder and primers. Let's take a look at that. Well, I'm going to try to keep this simple. So basically what I did was, let me set up the premise here. I'm using alpha brass. I don't overload, so I don't overpressure, and I usually get at least 15 firings out of that brass. So I took this chart and I said, let's go the first firing to the 15th firing, then with a new batch of brass, we'll go from the 16th to the 30th firing. And basically what you're seeing on the top here is the cost of the case, the bullets, the primers, the powder. The bullets, the primers, powder, that's not going to change, right? It's just the cost of what it is. I'm not taking into consideration fluctuations in the market, all that stuff. The case cost is going to go down over these firings. So as you keep reusing that case, it's no longer the very first firing of the original $1.25 per case. It starts to drop because we're really spreading that cost over the number of rounds. Then at the bottom, I said the cost per cartridge with no equipment, so that's just the cartridge cost. You can see that going down from the 1st to the 15th firing. Then I start to spread the equipment out over all of that as well. And you can see on the very first firing, you're looking at about $4.50 per case. But when we get to that 15th firing, we're down to $1.37 basically. And then on the 16th firing, that everything jumps up because it's new brass. So you can see what I've done here, right? It's the cycle, but over time, the cost of this equipment is spread out over a greater number of firings. And so that's why your case, your cost per cartridge with equipment keeps dropping. So look, I hope this makes sense, but this is just was a way for me to really look at this and start figuring it out as to how economical this really is. So if you really want something to take to your spouse, this could be something you could take to them and say, look, by the time I'm, into this for 15 firings, I'm at $1.37 a cartridge. And today, the cartridges that some of us are shooting are upwards of $2, $3, even $4 a case, generally in the $2 to $3 range. And so this could, in the long run, save you money. But beyond that, what is it doing? It's giving you that consistent accuracy that you're really after, as opposed to off-the-shelf ammo. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to final thoughts. Well, let's do a recap here. Really what I wanted to do, the whole purpose of this video, guys, was to give you an idea of what you're going to get into when you start reloading. I've got 5 friends who are coming from 22 long rifle into center fire competition. And remember, in 22 long rifle, you don't reload, right? You just buy the ammo off the shelf, the best you can buy, and you hope that it's accurate out to 300 and 400 yards. In center fire, this is your life, right? And it's what I've seen from all of them is not confusion, but just the overwhelmingness of this, right? Well, what about this? What do I need to do this? And things that they're not thinking of because they haven't had to. So that's why I really wanted to do this video. So what we did is we looked at low, medium, high categories. And again, this was not an exhaustive list of everything you should consider. Do your own research. I just put some options in there in those columns. Then we looked at what I have today, where I've gotten to today, right? This isn't what I first bought. This is where I've gotten to. And I think that came out around 55, 5,600. And then we looked at what if I was starting out today? What could I get away with, but still have quality reloads? That's the point. The point is, you can buy the cheapest of everything. But if you're going to have SDs in the 20s and 30s and ESs in the 60s and 70s, and your groups are this big, you've done nothing. Then just go buy off-the-shelf ammunition and don't even get into this stuff, right? You want to buy the right equipment at the right price that's going to give you good accuracy. So with that said, we went down that column and I think we came out at what? 2,700 bucks, I think, around that. I'll put it all up here on the screen. And then what I did was I looked at the cost over time with brass powder, primer, bullets, and the cost of this equipment spread out over those rounds and what that looked like at a round, which is really good, cheaper, and your own ammunition that is very accurate. Remember that your accuracy is going to be there, as opposed to the off-the-shelf stuff. Remember, I did a video on 6.5 Creedmoor ammo off the shelf, and there were some pretty startling observations there with this real expensive ammo was the worst of all of them. And then my hand loads were really the best out of all of them, right? So that's why we're doing this, to get the best accuracy that we can get. So it all comes down to just us. When we miss, like I did this weekend, the wind just killed me. But every time I came off the line, I said, my equipment's working fantastic. Everything's working great, except me. So that's how I want to do that. When I miss, I want to come off the line and say, that was me, nothing else. So, all right. Well, we've got a lot of other stuff coming up. I am going to do a video on this short action customs die. I gave these guys a little grief when I ordered this thing, and there were some issues with it. But since then, it really has settled into a really good piece of equipment. I want to give them justice, so I'll be doing that. I'm going to get back out into the range. The holidays are over. The weather's warming up. I'm going to be able to do a lot more of those practice videos at another range I go to for our 22 matches, and he has got some wild stuff set up on his stages. So those will be really fun and interesting for you to see. Well, that's about it. Thanks for hanging in on this one. I hope it was helpful. If you want a copy of this spreadsheet, here's my email. I'll put it up here somewhere. Email me. I'm very happy to send this to you, and you can just have it and start using it. It is an Excel spreadsheet, so you will need Excel. Well, guys, thanks again for watching. Subscriptions, likes, comments, love it all. I really, really do appreciate you hanging in there on this journey with me. And until next time, shoot straight.